hope this webinar will be beneficial for your professional excellence. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Hegazy, you can proceed.
Yes, thank you, Hassan, for the introduction, and thank you for all AACE team for having me and for coordinating such professional events. I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, today we will discuss mastering the critical path and mitigation actions. So we'll go about the principles and fundamentals of the critical path and the time schedules. To start from the planning and the principles of the planning and the early stages until we have a program with critical path and what are the things affecting the critical path. And then we'll go after that to the delays and how to check the root cause of delays to decide the appropriate mitigation actions and decide the way forward. This is my CV as introduced by Mr. Ghassan. The content today will go to the critical path method, the update and changes, load path analysis, and delay root causes and mitigation actions. What's critical path? Critical path is known for most of people in our field in construction, and it's very common that we have critical path in the schedule using critical path method and critical activities. And here the critical path is sequencing these activities. We break down the project to WBS, work breakdown structure, activities with duration relationships to make a schedule with sequence and logic. And in this schedule, we have a path with minimum duration of the project, the longest path going the minimum duration of the project using forward and backward calculation. We'll go to an example after that, but here the definition of the critical path method, and after we do the critical path method, we use it to get a critical path, which is the longest path of the activities with no margin to delay, with no float. And if these activities, these critical activities are delayed, will affect the completion of the project. So we have a longest path. This is the critical, and with float be delayed without affecting the whole completion. So please mute yourselves. Sometimes you have more than one critical path, so it can be multiple critical path or even sub path inside the main critical. Starting for the planning to make plan for the project, we start with an execution plan, with a methodology, how this project will be executed. So the first, we need to prepare an execution plan. What we will have from the resources, the number of crews, the sequence of work based on the site, the logistics, the availability with the contracting company to do, or they have resources, will do subcontract some work based on the suppliers and all vendors and everything. So they prepare a comprehensive execution plan with all consideration of quality, safety, and everything. This execution plan considers the whole scope of the work, how it will be executed with consideration of the quality, because the quality can affect the duration required for the activity, with consideration also for the contract, for the permits in the country, how to get the permits and approvals of the authorities, and including engineering, procurement, all phases of construction until the closeout, testing and commissioning, until the completion of the project. This also considers the resources and the availability of the resources with their productivity in the location of the project, and cash flow limitations, how to fund this project with the contract, if there is advance payment or no advance payment, how to fund the project with the payments expected until the completion with this cash flow limitations of the company, based on solvency of the company. We have, before planning, pre-planning drivers, is the constructability of the project. During the design, they need to consider how this project can be constructed. So the designers also consider the constructability. To design something can be physically constructed in reality. So they call it constructability, and it can be viewed with the technology and methods of construction and the installation. And also it can be called pre-planning and consideration of the resources, the access of the site, the infrastructure, the facilities can be provided in these sites with all also the site's limitations and logistics. And during this, alternatives can be checked and decided. They can be affected by the physical conditions of the site, the crews, the economy, and the available resources. And after that, it can be decided the best execution plan with the best economic basis to get profits for the project as per the contractor. To develop a program which we require a level of detail that we can get a critical path, because some high level of details we cannot know the critical path from the high levels. So in the WBS, we break down the project to WBS, work breakdown structure, but the levels of WBS are different from the level of the detail. We can go to the recommended practice of ACE 37 R06 for the levels of detail. We have levels of detail. Level 0, only single bar, that's from the start to the completion. Level 1, going to the major components of the project. If the project includes main buildings, main trades, then we go to this level 1. Level 2, subdividing to the milestone and the stages of the project and priorities of the project. Up to this stage, we don't have critical path, because this dependency between these high-level activities doesn't constitute a critical path. We, starting from level 3, can go to the details of elements, and in the construction, these elements can be linked with the sequence, which can provide a meaningful critical path network. So starting from detail level 3, we can have a meaningful critical path, and then we can manage and control accordingly. Because in this regard, we can know this activity, if it will be delayed, will affect the completion of the project. So we know the critical activities. We can monitor and control these activities to keep the project on schedule and ahead of schedule, and avoid delays or mitigate delays based on these critical activities. And more details and more levels will also provide critical path. Sometimes we do rolling schedule or look ahead for the shorter periods, and then we provide more details in the activities based on the, as we go, we know more in the project, called in the ACE, they call it planning package, and it can be called also rolling schedule. After we break down the activities, we make relationships between the activities. There are types of relationships: finish to start and start to start, finish to finish. And these dependencies, when we think about these dependencies from the practical side of view, we know some logic are built on the schedule, which is soft logic. It can be optional. It can be we can do this zone first or that zone. So these things we can make it can be changed with time, or can be decided discretionary based on the status of the project and the management team, or sometimes the priorities. But some other relationships are hard logic, mandatory. We cannot do it in a different way. We cannot build the columns before the foundations. We cannot do the walls and block work before doing the structure and skeleton. So these things are hard logic, cannot be done in a different way. And some relationships are resource dependency, because we have a certain number of crews in each trade, and they are moving from a location to another location. So this movement makes they need to finish here first, then the subsequent area and subsequent areas, and so on. So this is called resource dependency. So we have these main 3 types of logic when we are building the program. We'll go to this after that in analyzing the critical path. Then we have activities, we have the relationships between the activities. We develop the derivations of these activities to produce the whole network of the project and modeling of the activities. So durations can be calculated based on the quantity of work and productivity of the assigned resources and the driving resources. Then when we calculate the productivity, it's not normally one number, and it's a debatable thing. What can the crew produce, and what will be their production rate of each trade in this project? Because many things are affecting the productivity from location to location. These things can include the psychological factors, which is based on the when we build something in Saudi Arabia, it's different from building it in Europe. It's different from building it in East or India or these countries. So in each country, you can find different production rates, different nature of construction approaches from in each country. So many things here are affecting the productivity rates based on the crews and the location. Also in the location, there are other factors. The weather affects. In here in Gulf, we stop in the hot hours in summer. In Europe, they stop in winter in certain hours. So it's different from location to location. Availability of skilled resources. If you go to the capital or you go to big cities, you can find skilled resources easily. Maybe if you go in remote areas, it will be more difficult to find availability of skilled resources or to relocate them to this project or to have facilities for them or accommodation for them to accommodate them in the project. So this affects the availability of them. The productivity will be different. The trafficability to get them to the site. Some sites have logistics limitations going to the site. The economy and the status of the economy of the country are building this in this country. It affects also the productivity and getting the appropriate skilled resources. Also to control, we have things these things maybe we cannot control, but we have other things to control, like the site layout. How will be the site layout and the access to the site, the equipments, the technology, the materials, and safety and control of interruptions in case of some disruption and main trades are working at the same time. So these things we need all to control and have also appropriate supervision team. In many cases, if we don't have sufficient or skilled supervision team, it affects the productivity. So we need to take care of all these things to have prepare appropriate productivity and plan properly. And the activities, the duration should be continuous. This is one of the important things also to have a right critical path, to have continuous duration, not like this and make a duration of 100 days because this the work will be done in the beginning and then they stop and suspend for other works in the middle and continue after that. So if it's like this, we divide to different activities to have each activity working continuously. Other things we also discussed, they call it non-schedule planning items relating to, as I said, to logistics, to the approaches, the technologies, the cranes, the materials, the lifting plans, the access. All these things needs to be considered. It's not only the project, the quantities, so you can calculate everything with the quantity, you get the bill of quantity and the project, you can calculate everything. You need to know the logistics, the sites, all consider all these things and also the location, the limitations of the location, the factors affecting the productivity in each location to get a full proper planned schedule. We'll go then to the calculation. We did everything pre-planning, and now we go to the detailed calculations of the activities and critical path. So if we will start calculating the critical path, we have a network of activities with durations and relationship. For example, here we have the project is starting with activity A, which is its duration is 5 days. Then finish to start after activity A, activity B, C, D will start after B, E, F, H can start. after C, F, and H can start. D, G, H will start after each other until we have these dependencies to reach the project finish. Based on that, we have, when we calculate the duration of the full project, and to make this according to the contractual duration, we have a detailed roadmap with whole activities and dependencies to assure completing the project on time. We do this calculation in two ways. We have forward calculation. From this forward calculation, we calculate the early dates. The early dates, each activity can start and finish. So activity A will start on day 0, finish on day 5, C from 5 to 10, F from 11 to 15, J from 15 to 17, L from 23 to 25, then we finish the project on 25. We have different paths in different days. We have early start and early finish for each activity, when this activity can start and finish based on the dependency and the duration of each activity. So this is called forward calculation. We have the early dates. After that, we make backward calculation. From the completion of the project, the contractual completion, which we reached, which is 25 days here, we go backward and calculate other start and finish dates, which are the late dates. So we have late finish and late start for each activity. So for example, activity I, the late finish is 23 and late start is 15. So we have here activity J, the late finish is 22 and late start is 20. Sometimes you see the early and late dates are the same, or there is difference between them, until we reach activity. We will find some activities with no difference between early and late. So these activities, this difference is called the total float, which the activity can be delayed from early to late without affecting the completion date of 25 days. So this activity with zero total float cannot be delayed, and these are critical. And the activity with total float, it is non-critical and has total float of 1 day. If we consume this 1 day, it will be critical. Here, 5 days. If these 5 days are consumed, this will be critical. So still, they have 5 days total float without affecting the completion of the project. Based on that, we will find we have a critical path here. From it should be a full path from the beginning to the completion. So here the critical path is A, B, F, I, L, finish. So these activities are critical activities with zero total float. So we said calculate the forward path to get the early dates, the backward path to get the late dates, calculating the float values for each activity and path. So here we'll find another path with 3 days total float. So we can find at the end we have sometimes have sub-critical path, not only one critical path, we can have other path in the project. And we'll have real example after that. Here, this is only to know how the calculation goes, but for the real and we have more activities and we need software to calculate it using Primavera, for example. What are other factors affecting these calculations? It can be affected by the calendar days, because we will not work the whole days. We can work and have breaks and vacations and the holidays. So these vacation holidays needs to be considered. If we have 5 working days a week or 6 working days a week, and we have Eids and other vacations. So all these things needs to be considered during the calculation, and it will affect the calculation. The other thing is the constraints. Sometimes you have constrained certain activity cannot start before a certain date. So this activity needs to wait until a certain date to start. Or we have constraints on the completion. We need to complete some zones or areas as per the contract on mandatory completion dates. So these are also constraints. So these constraints affects the calculation of the critical path. The lags and leads. Well, in the example we discussed, we have the activity will finish, the other activity will start. Sometimes it's not like this. We need to wait a waiting period and some mandatory waiting period before starting the next activity. So this waiting period calls lag, or it's overlapping calls leads. We need to consider to have the all activities linked from its finish and start with the predecessor and successor, activity before and the activity after, and finish is linked. Sometimes you have activity linked to a successor, but linked from the start, not from the finish. So this is called dangling activities, and the finish should be linked of these activities. Resource limits. This calculation, it's based only on duration and dependencies. When we go to the resources required for each activity with this overlapping of these different activities in timely manner, so we have resource limits. We cannot have all these resources in certain times, so we need to extend the durations of such activities. In this case, the resource limits will affect the durations and the critical path, if it is on the critical path. The logic of the remaining durations. If we do some activities, we call it out of sequence, started because the logic of these activities was soft logic. So it could start before its relationship on the program. So started before its relationship and started out of the planned sequence on the program. So this early start, it started and partially completed. So the remaining duration of this activity will keep the same logic of as for its predecessor, or it can proceed without waiting for the predecessor. So this out of sequence and the retained logic affects the calculation of the critical path. The variance in productivity. The critical path or the durations of the activity are calculated based on productivities which are changed. So, and actually, practically on site, you are producing in a different rates and different productivity rates. So that affects the remaining durations and affecting the calculation of the critical path, which should be considered. But that changes of the scope of work if we have additional work to be added to the scope and to the work with its duration and relationships can affect also the critical path. So we can go to the key item of them. The first thing is the calendars. We need to consider the non-working days, and the most of contracts are stipulated using the calendar days without consideration of the working and non-working days. So this should be considered in the calculation of the schedule. You cannot work all calendar days, so we need to consider the working and non-working days while we are building the schedule. And sometimes very critical in the short duration projects when they say sign a contract with calendar days and there are many vacations coming in this short duration. It is like 4 month contract and there are vacations of 3-4 weeks in between. So it will be very critical and should be considered while signing the contract. And I encountered this in the design contracts. It was very challenging. The computing or calculation, as we said, of the can use in the schedule, you can use multiple calendars. We have like the engineer is working 5 days a week, the contractor working 6 days a week, the suppliers and factories are working 7 days a week. So we'll have different calendars in the project. So we need to consider the practicality of these calendars, how they are working and their working days. The AACE recommended practice to avoid these things in the analysis. It can be done in case of like we have cases of delay analysis or these things and the calendars are affecting the analysis. They proposed here the solution and the calendars, these calendars affecting the calculation to make only one calendar 7 days a week, and then adding these vacations embedded inside the durations of the activities. So this is a solution proposed in case of delay analysis by AACE. But we in normal cases, in normal schedules, we need to consider the calendars are assigned appropriately and no manipulation in these calendars. The other thing is the lags between activities. If we need waiting periods between each activity to be inside the relationships, some lags, and this should be very limited, used only when needed because it affects the calculation. And sometimes we can replace these lags with an activity. Here, for example, we are placing concrete, we have a lag for curing and then dismantling the forms to make an activity of curing instead of making lag. So if we have long duration of lag, or if we need to avoid the lags or the what can it can affect as manipulation to the duration calculation, it can, and critical path calculation, we can make it activities. Milestones and constraints. We said we have sometimes here in examples like the bomb delivery will be delivered by a vendor, and in the normal sequence it's going to a certain date, but in reality it will not be delivered between until a different date. So we need to add here a constraint. It cannot start before this date the installation because we got this date from the vendor. So we have constraints on the start. Sometimes we start on a certain date, or earlier than or later than a certain date. In the finish to finish on a certain date, or earlier or later than this dates. We have different types of constraints we can use in the program. Then this after this calculation, we have a total float, as we said, which can be positive if the activities can be delayed. So we can, and sometimes if we're updating the program and we are ahead of a schedule, we can have the full project with positive total float in a good situation, completing before the contractual completion date, or zero on a schedule, or negative. Negative, we can see the negative because the activities goes beyond the constraints, and the main constraint is the completion of the project. So this negative float indicates there is delay on the activity, and these activities fails to achieve the finish dates and the late finish dates. As we said, there are early and late finish dates. So if it's not achieving the late finish date, we'll have negative total float with the delay of the activity. The other thing we said, the out of sequence activities. So when we have the two types of scheduling, one is called the progress override and one is called the retained logic. In the retained logic, when the activity starts and we keep the retained logic, the remaining duration of the activity will continue after the remaining of the predecessor. But if it is progress override, it will proceed without this waiting for the predecessor. So normally we use the retained logic, and if we need to fix any relationship, we fix it while we are updating the schedule and recording this in a change log when we're submitting this update. So we need to agree also in the all these things when we doing the updates and the reporting, the types of duration, percentage, the scheduling approach and logic, and how we will do the changes and to be justified. So normally we use the retained logic, and if we need to break this relationship, we break it and make it in the change log. If we need to keep it, and in reality, the remaining duration will wait for the predecessor, will keep the retained logic as is. Open-end activities. So we need to check. We don't have open-end activity. Every activity is linked from predecessor and successor. And we don't have dangling activity. If it is linked like the successor is from the start, not from the finish, we will link it again from the finish. We will add the appropriate link to the finish and as per the appropriate relationship. The resource limits. So if the construction people know how to fight for the resources at site, and teams keep fighting for the resources because we have limited resources. So we need to consider also this on our project. Sometimes the project can proceed everywhere and we don't have mandatory relationships. We are not waiting for something to proceed with the subsequent rates in certain areas, but we wait for the resources. So we need to consider the availability of the resources and the available resources we have. And in some cases, we apply this to the program and we add this resource limits and make resource leveling on the schedule. So here for this example, we have a total resource limits for each trade of the resources, and we apply these limits to the resources. So we can affect the calculation of the durations of the activities and make a critical path based on the resource limits without like overlapping the activities without consideration of the resources required. One of the important things also, the ACE recommended practice 29R07, 29R03 stated the policy of the ACE recommended practice is to be software neutral, regardless the brand or the software used. One of the things they said, we will make 7 days calendar and other considerations we discussed. Or you can refer also to the recommended practice. We have today a case study. This case study is going with a project of 5 buildings, 3 substations, and external works. The critical path and longest path, we have 2 filters in the program. We can filter the critical and longest. We can say the longest is the continuous from the beginning to the completion. The critical, the total float is 0 or less. And we have multiple flow paths also to consider, like the near critical and this path. Here in this project, we have a critical path going from the beginning of the project and pre-construction, then going to the construction of substructure of building A, C, B, E, then going to the superstructure of building E and testing of building E. At the same time, there is another path going to the critical activities of substructure of building D till the testing and close out of building D. So we have here two, if we'll check this critical, we have 2 longest paths and 2 flow paths, one of the building E and one going to the building E and one going to building D. If we keep checking the flow path, if we organize the program with the flow path, we can see some sub paths are going in between with different total float until we can see one continuous path with a total float 14 days. So we need to keep checking this near critical path and if these are planned properly with appropriate durations and relationships. So the main things we need to check the contractual dates and milestones, contractual start, contractual finish, and if we have contractual milestones, all to be checked in the schedule. They are right. The logical sequence, type of relationships, duration of activities aligned with the resources, and common sense with what are the common sense with the experts. The experts who did the project, such projects before, they know what was critical in this project, and they can tell you these activities are not the critical activities of the project. Normally, in this type of project with these constraints, the critical activities will be such activities. You need to recheck the program and revisit it based on the expert's judgment and common sense. And we need to do this again with actual observance in the updates when we come to the updates. So when we go to the updates, why we update the program? To keep a schedule effective and control and know the status of the project. We collect the data, reflect the actual dates, and recalculate the project to get the update of the project. So we know the progress percentage, we know the remaining activities, the remaining scope, and the new critical path based on the update. So we'll find in the update a different longest path. Here, the longest path going to E and D only without going to the substructure of ABC as was the original one. So the critical path changes with time as per the updates. And we can check also we have not on this is the longest, but we still have other critical path with total float less than 0. If you see the longest path, the total float here is minus 86 in the update, but we still have other critical paths minus 72, for example, going to a different building, and we still need to check all critical paths to mitigate all of them to recover the delay of the project if required. So to analyze these critical paths, we need to know some general principles. The critical path changes with time. It needs to be based on proper logic and relationships. The ownership of the total float is to the both parties. Each party can use it. We need to compare to the baseline to know how the critical path changes and it is logic or not. We need to check if there is sub-network floats or sub-network critical activities or critical path. And near critical, we need to check all of this to know the critical and manage the project. We need also to validate this in the baseline. We need to review, as we said, the contractual dates, the scope, the relationships, the level of detail required here. It said the level of detail to be from 0.5 to 5% of the contract value, the responsible party to each activity to be different. And in the update, we need to check the accuracy of the actual data and the critical activities of the as-built. They call it controlling activities because it's not modeled or not based on the relationships. It's based on the observation from the actual dates. We can do some sampling to make checks, no changes in the update. Also, we can check from update to update is consistent and the actual dates which are used are the same, no changes or manipulation. There are some permitted changes and not permitted changes. So we need to see, we update, so we update the progress and dates. We update the resource allocation. We can make minor resequence to the activities if it is practically required. We cannot change the scope because it needs approval to change the scope. The duration and remaining duration, there is limitation to change the durations and not playing a lot with the durations and remaining duration. We need to change it with the appropriately to the proportional to the percent complete of the activity. So we cannot exaggerate in the remaining duration and destroy the whole original calculation of the project or the schedule and critical path. The constraints also cannot be changed without approval. The remaining, we have actual and the remaining. The remaining, it calculates the critical activities of the remaining. We can check the duration of the remaining, as we said, with the proportional to the original duration. We also can modify the relationships with consideration of the retained logic as discussed. If it can proceed, we break the link. If it cannot proceed, we keep the retained logic. We need to check all these sequence. When we need to check the float path, we start with the delayed path and the most critical activity and most delayed activities. As we saw in multiple float paths, we start with the 84, then we go to the starting with the minus 84, then we go to the minus 73, one by one, review the logic, review the durations, the subcritical path in between to check how to mitigate these delays if we have delays. And we keep checking the relationship. Checking the mandatory relationship, as I said, the hard logic and the activities and the path with hard logic will be very difficult to mitigate. While if we have soft logic, we can mitigate those soft logic with the site conditions and site situation and also the availability of the resources to mitigate the delays. So the hard logic will be harder to mitigate. From time to time, as we are updating, we get the forecasting and the remaining duration and the new completion date. it's not only the schedule to calculate this, we need also to do observational trend to check the trends of the productivity of the activities. As we said in the beginning, the productivity of the activities and actual productivity affect the critical path. So we planned to do like 100 meter a day, and while actually we planned the crew will do 100 meter a day, while actually the crew is doing 50 meter a day. So it's affecting like double duration. So these things we need to be considered in the remaining duration and the required resources. We need to recalculate and forecast the trends of the crews and their productivity to forecast the completion and get right appropriate completion date and forecast completion date and know the delays. There are many reasons for the plans are failing. One of them to understand the scope and have good execution plan. So we need to have a good plan and good execution on site. So to have also good execution by the team and construction team. So we need to check when we have an issue, we need to check what the reason. The reason is the plan was wrong or the execution is wrong, or no, we cannot say wrong all the time, but there is some issues need to be fixed in the plan to be practical, or some things needs to be fixed on site and construction methodology to achieve the plan. So at this time, we may revise the plan or revise the construction methodology, or the execution plan can be revisited. We need to check the financial support and cash flow. We need to check the non-planning methodologies discussed in the beginning related to the logistics and nature of the project and the location. To know the root cause, there are multiple approaches for the root cause. One of them is 5 why questions. Why the project delayed? Because of this equipment are not installed. Why it's not installed? Can be not installed because of the foundation are not ready, or because of the equipment are not delivered. Why it's not delivered? Because the material is not approved, the submittal is not approved, or there is shortage at the problem with the supplier or the delivery. So how we can, then we will reach the root cause at the end, and then we can know how to mitigate it. Mitigate it with a quicker approach of delivery, with doing the checking, approving the drawing of the foundation and implementing the foundation. So if we know in the root cause, we can solve the problem. So one of them is 5 why question. One of them is AACE-KSA or fishbone diagram. Sometimes we don't have one reason, we have many reasons and sub reasons until we go to the root cause. And to focus on the productive causes, we can go to the Pareto analysis, which is saying 20% of the causes are producing the 80% of the results. So to know, you cannot go to the all causes and fix all of them. We need to go to the productive or the root causes, which are 20% of the reasons we have for the delay. If we will mitigate this 20%, we will mitigate 80% of the delays. If we'll go to the practical examples of these things, sometimes we have resource issues. We have shortage in manpower. So if you know, when we check the root cause, and the root cause was shortage in manpower, so we need to hire extra crews or working overtime. But overtime can work, or double shifts can work only for temporary periods, because if we work for long periods, the productivity will decrease again. The reason can be idle equipment. Equipment needs maintenance or needs operators or skilled operators to reach the optimum production rates. Non-productive resources because of supervision, because of training. Sometimes we do lump sum work or incentive programs to have the resources productive. Delay in engineering work, assigned technical team and skilled technical team. Material issues, we can check this material needs long time for production. The suppliers are limited. We can check the alternatives to get this material earlier. The reason sometimes goes to the cash flow. We need to do cash flow enhancement to the contractor who is expediting the payment process, or improve the time for the interim payments, increase the advance payment or pay material on site, or payment to subcontractors directly if the main contractor is getting the payment and not paying the subs. Sometimes you have management issues. The contractor doesn't have good project managers or good management team, so we need to support them in management or make training for them or change them or enhance their skills with less time losses. Sometimes we have time losses because of the transportation. How to decrease this time losses, solve the logistics things at site, or rearrangement of the with the responsibility of the managers for getting more responsibility and more engagement for productivity improvement or site layouts and etc. So these can be the key reason and solutions. After we do this solution, we need to implement this on the software. It can be implemented in two things. One of them is to decreasing the duration. If we assign more resources, the duration can be decreased of these activities. We cannot increase the resources to infinity. We increase the resources after certain increase, then the production and productivity decrease again. So to a limit, we see how can be effective to increase the resources and compress the duration. And this is called the crashing. The other approach in the program, the fast tracking, overlapping the activities, but it may cause risk of rework. And sometimes if also these mitigations doesn't work, or the contractor still has a right of extension of time, but the employer needs the project earlier, it can be accelerated. So the mitigation means the duty of contractor without extra cost, unless the contractor is responsible. So he will pay for the delays of his responsibility, but he will not pay for the delays of responsibility of the employer, and the contractor will be granted an extension of time. And in such a case, if still the employer needs the project earlier, will agree with the contractor on acceleration agreement with extra cost, and it should be agreed before implementing the acceleration. After we decide all of these plans with all action and mitigation actions as discussed, we check the effectiveness of these actions. It's improving, not improving well. We still have other plans or alternatives to implement until we get the recovery, or the recovery is not enough and we need acceleration. So we check the effectiveness to decide the way forward. And the further actions, sometimes we go to micromanage the contractor resources. If the contractor is not able to do this, we go sometimes to direct payment to subcontractors or suppliers. And if all of these things are not working, or based on the capability also of the client, not capable to do all of these things, in such cases, we may descope areas, the capacity of the contractor is performing, but not performing well to complete on time. So we'll descope some zones from the contractor, so he can perform completing part of the project on time, and get other contractor doing the other parts on time. And the final and worst case solution, the all actions are not effective, the contractor is not performing at all, to terminate the contract. And to terminate, normally we give grace periods to the contractor to improve, and if no improvement and no mitigation, effective mitigation measures, it can be terminated and reaward the contract to another contractor. This is the final solution. And now we can go to key takeaways from the session. The first thing is to plan with consideration of the completion and whole picture and whole overview, as we said, non-scheduling related things, and everything to be in consideration, all risks, and to have also mitigation plans in place. When we have delays, we need to check the root cause of the delays to decide the appropriate mitigation and the recovery plans. We need to focus all the time win-win situation, not win-lose situation, not making more pressure on the contractor to complete the works prior to the contractual dates or to accelerate without a clue. And if they have extension of time, we need to provide them the extension of time and to plan their works according to their entitlement with appropriate resources. Sometimes we make more pressure on the contractor, getting more resources. Resources are idle on site and not productive, or getting the resources and accelerating the work with no need for acceleration. So we need to work win-win situation for both parties for long-term relationships between the parties. Thank you. Any question? I finished.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mohamed Hegazy, for your very detailed, informative presentation. So we'll take a few questions from our participants. So kindly unmute yourself and you can ask the questions.
Or raising hand.
Yeah.
Somebody will raise hand. I'll unmute one by one if we have questions.
Okay, so there are some comments here. So they are asking for the copy of the presentation slide.
Okay, I'll share with you the presentation so
Yeah,
you can
okay,
save it.
thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you repeat the solutions of these delays? Can you repeat what are the solutions?
Here you mean here the root causes and solutions. You mean this slide?
Yes.
We have sometimes issues in resources, cash flow, or management. In case of resources, we need to increase the resources or to check if we have non-productive resources, how to make them productive. If manpower needs supervision or needs training, we can increase the supervision team or get appropriate supervision, skilled supervision team, or make training for the laborers. We can sometimes find the skilled laborers are producing more than other crews, so they make them train each other to increase the productivity of the whole team. Sometimes these resources related to engineering.
So my question.
And so on.
So
Yes.
my question is that the cash flow issues you have mentioned that advanced payment, increase pay material on site, but when we look into the EPC engineering procurement construction project, the budget is constant, mean the budget is not to be increasing, but here you said that advance payment increase. So so why we do that increase payment? So
Sometimes we need
it's
to do
make an
so.
effect on.
Sometimes we need to do so. Sometimes we make big variations, and based on these variations, we need to increase the advance payment. Sometimes we need to the contractor is performing but doesn't have the sufficient solvency to cover the funding to can support them, but instead of 10% make 15% advance payment. So it's contractual clauses based on contractual agreements, and we have it with experience. So these things doesn't affect the budget. We still have the same budget, but it's only payment terms. Okay.
Okay, I got your point.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Firstly, I'd like to thank AACE Arabian Gulf and special thank to Engineer Mohamed Magid. By the way, I know you from I think more than 10 years and still the same, sharing your knowledge at the best way. Many thanks for you. I want to ask one question, please, about cash flow. There are, I don't know, this is a rule or method that the the common cash flow has to be as a bell shape.
Yes.
What's your opinion of this matter? Is it a rule, or is it ideal, or is it myth?
No, it depends on the situation. Sometimes you can have, but it is the normally the progress of the project going lazy start, then increase, then again at the end you cannot progress too much. So because of this, you can find the bell shape. So this is common and normal, and this is true. But sometimes you have like two bell shapes. You have works in a phase one going, and then interact. There is intersection with the works of phase two. So you not have ideal S-curve. You have or bell shape. You have like two peaks. So it depends on the project. But
I know,
normally you
but
have a peak and then go down.
is it a rule that if there is no any commitment of this bell shape, we can refuse the baseline as
You need to justify. If it is justified, it's okay. Yeah, normally it is a rule. Yes, it's a bell shape. It's and if it is, you need to deviate from it, and this is logic, and you can justify it. Just it's justified, and it's okay.
So, okay. So thank you very much for all the questions. So before the end of our session, so
Yeah, just a question. Good evening.
yes, go ahead, please.
For certain clients, there are like specific criteria for the schedule. Like these many percentage of activities should be having like finish to start relationship, and how much percent to be like start to start relationships. So in some specific projects like which is lateral, it will be difficult to comply those requirements. So how we can be able to justify this situation?
I agree with you. You need to make a start and finish to finish at the same time, and convince them it is not practical to make it finish to start, and unless you will divide it too much activities, and will be very heavy program. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, because they have some requirement like these percent of activity should be in a critical path. So in some projects it's not
Critical
possible
path
even
is
for the
something else. Yani, the relationships, I
But
agree with you. Critical path, you need to consider not having many activities on the critical path, because it is, if you will increase some resources to make better arrangement, you will have less activities on the critical path. Right.
So, okay, so before we end, let me share and present the certificate of appreciation to our technical speaker.
Can I ask something?
Okay, yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. Just me. I think thank you for this informative presentation, Engineer Mohammed. I have actually two questions regarding in the first instance of the project in the execution
Hello.
Yeah, can you repeat the
phase.
question, please?
The constructability you mentioned, the constructability study. Sorry, is my ears
So it's
the
breaking.
voice is heard?
Breaking.
It's coming choppy.
Yes, Ahmed, can you repeat
Can I
again?
ask?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Just a question regarding the constructability study. Is this the constructability from your point of view? Is this a scope of engineering contractor or construction contractor?
It needs to be considered from the design phase. And the design phase, it can be checked from the design phase with the team who are designing, to check if it is constructable, how it will be constructed. Yeah, I know some projects, they did heavy studies on this, how the project will be constructed, how many tower cranes we need, what the locations of the tower cranes, how this will affect the logic and the sequence of the activities. After that, the contractor need to study it again, based on the experience of the contractor as he will construct the work. and if can advise on something which can be changed or
Yeah.
to enhance the constructability, then it can be changed on the design or something like this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you mentioned that it's a scope of engineering contractor, but the construction contractor should revisit this study.
Not revisit the study. He will make a study again.
Right?
And he will make his study again. Maybe he will see, because his full responsibility of the
yes.
contractor. Maybe he will find a extremely different way.
Yes. Thank you. Another question, if you excuse me, regarding the working in brownfield. I'm working on oil and gas field, so in some project we working in a brownfield. I didn't see in the presentation didn't mention that something regarding the CMOPS, because one of the mitigation action regarding the delay of project, especially working in brownfield, the CMOPS study, which is I think is a critical step we implement it during the execution phase.
Thank you for adding this, because I don't have much experience in this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
Mohamed.
we end. So I would like to read this certificate of appreciation to our guest speaker tonight. So in behalf of Saudi Arabia sections, present the certificate of appreciation to Mohamed Hegazy for our technical speaker virtual webinar. The title is Mastering the Critical Path and Mitigation Actions, held Tuesday, 22 of April, 7 p.m. in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, signed by AACE President Ghassan Ahmad Al-Dusari. So thank you very our guest and our participant for this webinar. Hope to see you soon in our future webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.